Hi, Kylie. Welcome to the Accountants Exposed podcast, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you having me on.
Now, you've been in accounting for well over 20 years now.
I have.
Tell me, tell me a bit about your journey into and in the industry.
So I decided I wanted to be an accountant in year 10, and that was because I had an art teacher that didn't like my beautiful cape that I made, and I had decided that it was too subjective. And I'd also seen during the holidays that management accountants earned over $100,000 at the time. I thought that was quite a bit of money. So I changed all my electives, picked up 3-unit maths, 3-unit economics, dropped art, and that was my decision made. And so then it just was from there, went down to University of Wollongong, and at uni I decided I wanted to be a partner in a Big 8 firm at the time. And then when I was coming out of university, it was 1993, and there'd been a bit of an economic dip, so they weren't recruiting as much. So I started my last semester. I got a job 4 days a week, and at a firm called ISIS, which has changed their names, funnily enough, since then. But I started there, and then I got to a point where I was wanting to do my CA, and so I moved to a larger firm in the city, and that was called Southerton's. And
Were they in the city or in Bondi?
They were in the city at the time. So Southerton's merged, and one of the partners who I actually had worked for, a guy called Robert Rockland, he got the name Southerton's again after sort of some of the other partners had retired.
That's the story.
Yeah, and so he had a kind of a few. Both of the people that I had worked for were a bit creative, and so my first job I actually got with my CV being in the format of a balance sheet. So I had sort of my assets.
Seriously?
Yeah, had my assets
listed.
Liabilities, I said, due to some creative accounting, there weren't any. Owner's equity, I had referees. And so he was someone that we had sort of Leo McKern, I think his name was. And so he had some creative clients. And then my second boss was the same. So he sort of looked after some people that did like filmmakers for Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, some of the theatre production companies. And then so my next role, I was wanting to sort of following that path of wanting to work in a bigger accounting firm. And so I got a job in Deloitte in 1996. And while I was there, we had a few people that were doing across the firm. So you obviously sort of have your tax silos, and I was in the business services Deloitte Private, which was called Growth Solutions back then, and sort of started working with people that had entertainment industry clients. So people like Greg Norman, Jimmy Barnes. We looked after the Crowded House Farewell, and so from there I went and worked overseas in the BBC for a little while. Travelled, so kind of travelling is one of my main priorities in life. Got over 70.
Is that when you got the travel bug?
I do have a travel bug, so I've travelled to over 70 countries. So I'm not coping with lockdown. I've actually booked a trip for next Europe now. But
really, where are you going?
I'm going to fly into London because I figured that's probably one of the places that will open up to.
I was like, did you book at the moment Qantas announced that they're going to have direct flights?
I haven't booked any flights, no.
Okay.
I've just booked all the accommodation and all through like bookings.com and all no payment up front and then also cancelable. So kind of it's a pretty safe way of doing it. And then once we get the flights, I'll put those in at the end.
When is that booked for?
September.
So, ages away.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you really plan all your stuff that far ahead?
Yeah. I do plan my travel a year out in advance.
Okay. Is that big always, or is it just because of work, or what?
Always. You get really good deals with flights and things normally a year in advance.
Yeah, okay.
And also...
I'm the opposite. I'm the guy that books it like 4 weeks in advance. I'm like, oh yeah.
I've never booked anything 4 weeks in advance. I just couldn't cope with that. But I've never been caught out, apart from, we did have a trip booked to Europe July 2020, which obviously COVID cancelled that. And I literally just got a refund from Webjet yesterday. So that's...
Took a bit of time.
It did take a bit of time.
Have you always been that structured in your life and like that organized?
I think so, actually. It's been doing my head in. My oldest son, who's in year 11, is terrible at planning. And so having them in my office and seeing what they're like, I've got another son who's in year 9, and just their lack of structure and their lack of planning, I find it's so incredibly frustrating that I've even put him through a coaching program.
A coach, like
Yeah.
run by you or
No,
a separate one?
it's a really good program, but he hasn't sort of picked up the hints of, a study plan and what you should be doing. So
Did you have that as a kid, like when you were going through school?
yeah, I did actually. It was funny. I was recently up in my son's room where I've stored a lot of my old books, and I came across a letter that I had written, and it must have been something we were doing for, pretend you're writing to a newspaper. And I was talking about how it was unfair that we had to do cooking and sewing, and we weren't given opportunities to be doing woodwork. And, what if we wanted to become an architect? And what if some of the guys wanted to be? And I was in year 8 when I wrote that. So apparently, and I'd forgotten, obviously, I'd written that, but I was, I had very neat writing back then, which...
Oh man,
Yeah.
I can barely read my writing these
Yeah.
days, honestly. Like I can't say my writing was that great. That's cool, but like I literally struggle to read it some days. Are
Yeah,
you in the same boat,
I'm in the
Ken?
same boat. It's doctor's
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah. I wonder why that happens. Just because we spend so much time typing instead of writing,
I think
and it
so.
just kind of deteriorates.
Yeah. But even the children, like even my kids don't have neat writing now. I just don't think
Hmm.
the emphasis
Are your
on...
kids in a school that spends a lot of time on iPads and laptops?
Yes, not as much. So they've swapped schools. So they were in they're at Waverly College, so sort of a Catholic
Yeah.
school. There it was much better in terms of the IT department and what they had. They all had Macs and a lot more structure, where they're now in a performing arts school at Newtown, and it's a little bit...
Because they're in that incline, or is it because they got inspiration from mum?
Well, I did put them both into dancing, and thinking that it just was at Brent Street at Moore Park, and it was largely around just coordination and a little bit of discipline as well. I think dance is really
Yeah.
good for that, and they both kept going. So my older son only stopped this year to focus on his studies. That's worked, but anyway. And my younger one's still going. So he loves parkour. So a large part of our lockdown
Yeah,
has
wow.
been following him around and jumping off things that sometimes...
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you like the reason I ask is interesting because I'm kind of at that stage where we're expecting a child and I
Congratulations.
realized, thank you. But it comes with its own challenges, and one of them that we realized recently is a lot of our friends have put down their kids' names at a private school from birth, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, how the hell do you even know where you'll be living, what you'll be doing, if you'll be alive, what your financial situation will be, where your kids' kind of inclinations are? Like you said, some will be artsy, some will be more academic, etc. Like, what did you do, or was that even an issue back in those times?
So my boss, when I started at Deloitte, he lived down St. Susie, still does, and his son went to Waverly College. And we were living at Bondi at the time, and a lot of Waverly College sort of young men that I'd met, they were always incredibly polite. To me, it was they didn't have some of the level of ego maybe that I'd seen in other schools. And obviously, working at Deloitte, you come across a lot of people that were clients of options traders and different people that have come from different schools. A lot of them, I grew up in a public school area, and a lot of my friends have actually done quite well from public school. So I think you always find your own kind of views. But to me, Waverly College was a middle option. It sort of was, it had the benefits of private schools in terms of very nice campus, but it then didn't have what I perceived to be some of the entitlement, I suppose, that sometimes you can have.
I find, Catholic schools are generally kind of, except St. Catherine's, like they generally have a good middle ground. It's interesting now because I think things have changed where,
well, it didn't
like
suit...
I went to, oh no, just like I went, so you're saying it didn't suit your kids? Or
No.
really? How come?
No. Because of they were dancing, they weren't sort of rugby boys. And so that was the younger son coming through. He just got himself in with a group of friends as well that I didn't necessarily think were a good influence on him. And it just, he was starting to change. So if they wanted to stop doing the things they wanted to do because for their own reasons, but they were getting taunted and, if you dance, you must be gay, that kind of still behaviour.
okay.
And so both of them, so we decided to move to get the younger son into Newtown. That's sort of, both of them got shortlisted, one for drama, one for dance, but didn't get in. So we made the let's up and move. And it coincided with other things happening in my life as well. But
You never considered the whole private school thing? Like,
do you know, we talk
the Newingtons and all that?
So my godson's at Newington. And my now husband went to Trinity. And so we talk about sometimes with my younger son, potentially putting him in. But he's got a really lovely group of friends now. And their friends are just so important, I think, particularly for boys, maybe both. But I think in terms of the peer pressure and what they're going to achieve, that my older son, I don't really necessarily think he's got a good group of friends, and it shows. When my younger one, they're just very supportive of each other. They're always encouraging each other to be active. I don't know. He has a very organised friend who I just think is amazing. And I'm like, how did I get that? So he's always organising them to do different things. And so during lockdown, they'll go out and they'll play football, or booked a tennis court for them the other day. So they're trying to do one thing a day.
That's awesome.
My older one, Lucy's got a job actually at the moment at Coles, which I'm thinking
that's where I had my first job as well.
Yeah.
Check.
Yeah.
Best job ever. Loved it. It paid more than Macca's.
Well, he started at Macca's and he didn't last at Macca's, which was concerning.
Why? The lack of systems and structure?
Well, okay. So this is really weird. So in McDonald's, their automated system is very good, but you have to log in to it. And so I think just that he'd miss shifts, and he sort of said that wasn't the case, but reading between the lines, I think he was a bit unreliable. Where Coles, and I cannot believe this, their roster system is done through a WhatsApp group.
Seriously?
Yeah. But it works for him because he sees it. It's like another alert. So it's an interesting insight into technology that is.
How do you cope with being so structured and organized yourself, and having been that way from a young age, and having people around you that are not structured and organized?
Well,
and they're in
I'm
your
on
life
my
and you can't get rid of them?
So. And he is another accountant. He's someone I actually met on the Deloitte Partner Program years ago. And so we have a spreadsheet for our holiday, and he did the spreadsheet for our recent renovation. So I have.
Does that make a difference?
Yeah,
does that kind of okay?
Yeah, it does. It just I suppose to me, I'm happy to change plans. If something changes, then you just go with the flow. But I like something to look forward to, which is an interesting one for me at the moment, being this point in my career that it's you're always when you're younger, it's getting what do I want to be, and then you are that, and then it's like, what do I want to achieve in that career, and then if you've done that, and then if it's travel, or whether I've written a book, got different types of businesses. I've had a bigger business I was a partner in, and it's what's your next plan and what's your next goal. So that's the bit that I'm struggling with as to, well, what's next? And the idea of sort of retirement and sitting around a beach, I'd probably get bored. I literally was bored yesterday because we've had a renovation going. I've had all the kids in the office. Work's been quite busy, and I'm sort of I do a lot of film and TV audits. I don't actually have any in at the moment. I finished 4 last week, and so now I'm going, yes, I'm bored, and this is ridiculous. What is wrong with me? So I had to clean. I hate cleaning. Clean office.
I can see there's a rocking chair in the office. Actually,
it is. Yes.
Is it just like one of those pieces as part of Lotus Home, or is it a thing they actually chill out on?
No, that is. It normally has a back massager actually on it that I just took off, and that's sitting down at the desk cross-legged. I'm a bit crooked. Probably I would recommend anyone starting out, start out feet in front of you, straight, good posture.
So you actually chill out on the chair once every couple of hours?
Probably not every couple of hours, but I will try and sit in there and turn it on. Yeah, I'm trying to move a little bit more. I think that's part of the problem with lockdown is, for me, some people have got really fit where I've tended to, I think having the children around as well, just sort of, it's not easy to focus. So I've been sitting down a lot more, sitting down at work, sitting down when I get home. We went for a walk this morning.
Important.
So are you going to put your children down on a private school then? What's your decision?
This is the thing. So when we look at all of our friends, and the majority of them are enrolled in like private schools,
Mm.
and it kind of makes me think like once we've done a survey of everyone, I feel like it's changed because Australia has and I looked at the stats, we have like the highest or either one of the highest or the highest uptake of private schooling in the OECD
Mm.
kind of world. Um, and I didn't realize how bad kind of that is, because what I'm finding happens is you have your kind of top echelon society, or well, not top echelon, whoever can afford private school fees
Mm.
will put their kids into a private school a private school. And then you have the ones like the migrants will put their kids into selective schools,
Mm-hmm.
because we have a huge selective school system in New South Wales. I didn't realize that either until I researched that.
Mm.
Compared to all the other states, ours is massive.
Mm.
Um, and then you have the other ones that either don't like the whole, when I talk to Anglo parents and their first thing about selective schools, like, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's all Chinese and Indian. I don't really want my kids to go there. Or they use the words, it's not as diverse, but it's only not as diverse because they're white,
Mm.
really. So they wouldn't, all the kids can't get in there, because I find Anglo parents are very much against the whole like tutoring for years beforehand.
Mm.
Whereas Asian parents are like, no, 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 3 hours of tutoring every day is good for your son.
Yeah.
And then you got the Catholic school system, which is kind of like holistic / people that can't afford maybe 40 grand a year for multiple
Yeah.
kids. And then that makes me think, okay, cool. So you take away all these people, selective private Catholic. What have you got left in the public school system?
Mm.
In the like affluent suburbs,
Yeah.
you don't really have much left, like except probably the lower socioeconomic or potentially troubled families. Obviously, some exceptions. I'm completely generalizing here and
Yeah.
kind of hypothetical, and that makes you worried. It's like, well, I wanted to send my kids to in public school, but then what are the demographics in the public school given what else is happening
Yeah.
around? So that was my concern, and it made me realize our system is a bit screwed up, where you have private schools, they get so much funding,
Yeah.
and it's such a big system. Instead of just having it egalitarian, where you just have a lot of public schools, they get a lot of funding, and it's all in the level playing field. And Finland did a really interesting thing. They outlawed all private schools like 40 plus years
All
ago.
right.
Yeah, and they've got, like, in terms of rankings based on exam results, they're the only country, like Western country, in the top 10, I think. Everyone else they're like number 2 in the world. Everyone else is Asian countries, basically.
You're right.
So I found that fascinating.
Well, I think my difference too is if you go through a public school and you do well, you have to be self-motivated. Like I see what
Mm.
help the boys get, and and I know the teachers are trying their hardest, but they're only required to do one Zoom lesson a week, the teachers.
Mm.
So whereas all my friends' kids that are in private schools, they are rocking up with a shirt on every morning, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
hands
normal
off for the
class.
parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where my
I don't get that either. I genuinely don't understand why public school, because I have parents, like people that work for me, I have
yeah.
mothers. The ones that are in public
Yeah.
schools, they are struggling with the whole
Yeah.
homeschooling thing,
We're getting a
especially in other
really big
states as
gap
well.
between the public and the private schools, and the technology
Yeah, I don't
is a
understand
large
why
part
a
of that.
teacher's a teacher. Like, they're employed for the same period of time, they're employed to do the
Mm.
same thing. Why can't they deliver the same service as a private school in terms of the Zoom thing? Why is it just one Zoom a day? It's
Yeah,
crazy.
well, I heard one of my friends said that she's got a friend who's a teacher, and she said, "I don't want to learn how to use Zoom. Like, I'm not going to do it." It's like,
And that's the thing.
wow.
And that's the thing, the other thing. Yeah, like a private school can employ the best teachers and get rid of them very
Mm.
quickly, the ones that are not
Yeah,
performing. Because as soon as parents and students complain, they get rid of
yeah.
them. Public school, you can't get rid of a shit
No,
teacher.
no.
Um,
Well,
so,
when the school first started in the last lockdown, um, I just I actually contacted them and said, just put them into the calendar. So trying to find where their information is, like they literally
mm,
say a teacher would just send a link, 15 minutes before, oh, we're going to have a Zoom session today on this time. It's like teach them how to use Gmail and the calendars, because that's what a lot of the
corporate.
schools do. Yeah, and so that's the thing.
Mm,
I read a really good article the other day about how generations now aren't using folders, and so like that structure and systems that for me makes just if you want to find something, I know where to look at it. And
yeah.
I've got folders for all my clients, and information's all there.
Were you like that innately? Like, I'm curious, is it a personality thing or just like a parental thing? Or what's the reason why it was so structured from a young age?
I think innately. I mean, I look at my
Conscientious.
brother back when we went to school. My mum was a science teacher, and my dad was a clerk of the court, so solicitor.
Mm.
So they valued education, but my brother, he ended up leaving school in year 11 and becoming a carpenter. Is now a builder. And so I think for me, it's just is innate. I was organised. I like being organised, feeling, if you want to find something, I know where it is. That's probably a little bit of OCD, I suppose. I hate having, if
Yeah.
I've got 8 glasses and one breaks, I can't have 7. It's a bit of a joke amongst my friends. It's like, oh shit, we better break another one now. I'd rather have 6.
Even
Yeah.
numbers only. Balance. I love the CV thing. Where'd you get that idea from? The balance sheet CV. I've never. Obviously, I look at thousands of CVs. I'm yet to come across one like that.
I think it was
It's
somewhere.
very clever.
So when I was at Deloitte, I used to do the psych tests along the way, and they'd ask me, "What do you do here?" And so I've always been more creative bent. So for me, it's like ideas. I've always got different ideas for things, and so that was just something. Must have been something at university that popped up, and it was. I kind of strongly believe that you're either got to be really good at what you do and stand out for your brilliance at school, or you've got to be a little bit different. And it has worked. I only did it for that one job, but he was advertising for someone with 3 years experience, and at that point in
Yeah.
time, I was still at uni, but that stood out for him because he was creative, whereas some other people would have just looked at that and thought that was stupid. But at the end of the day, it meant that I worked with someone that
It resonated with.
I
Yeah.
went and watched him in a play one time with his kids' school, and he is actually, his father-in-law was Max Dupain, so he was married to Max Dupain's daughter.
Wow.
And so so I've always worked. I was thinking about that actually, just in preparing that. I look at my career, and so I used to be a dancer, and kind of chose to do my tax exam over going on a cruise. We're in a cabaret show at the time. It's probably my one regret. I should have done the cruise. But and I still now, I think, if what I wanted to do is probably still more in the sort of the film and TV. And I talked to some of the people that I do the film and TV QAPE audits, and they actually do the production accounting. I said, I think when the kids are older, I wouldn't mind doing some production accounting. And they all think I'm a bit crazy because it's pretty busy and stressful, but I wouldn't mind being a little bit more hands-on and some creative ideas. Or
Well, I remember we talked about, you even did your course recently as well, the screen and I think movie production course.
Yeah.
So when can we expect to go to your premiere?
I started writing a script at one stage. I don't know. I kept hoping that I could live vicariously through my kids. They haven't been very helpful. I had this fantastic idea. It was when we were traveling in France, and they tried snails, and then like frogs and things like that. And so I still think this is if anyone wants to take this idea, they're more than welcome, because my kids are not cute enough anymore. But it was called Kids Disgusting 60. And so the idea was like just a YouTube channel. And so that we had, just a whole lot of food that, whether it be snails, truffles, blue cheese. And so they had to like describe it, so use all their senses, and then sort of give a bit of brief history as to why the food had come about, like what regions it had come from, and then taste it. So I just thought that was a kind of something they could have done, but that idea didn't go anywhere.
Well, I heard the new iPhone came out yesterday. It's got an amazing cinematic mode.
Okay.
So that could be your path into, or your foray into movie making.
Well, my younger son, so my older son still talks about wanting to be a director. So I've got a couple of film director clients who are quite well known. So they've got a lot of opportunities to, in terms of connections, my work has given me a lot of really interesting opportunities. And I kind of, literally after this, I've got a call around FBT, and it's all to do with bringing people out from the US, and they're here at accommodation. So there's all these differences that, they're here longer because of COVID. Everything is quite different. The type of work.
Can you imagine doing any other, like, I know you're big on having a niche and specialization. Yours for many years has been the film industry, and I guess to some extent like the high net worth family offices. Can you imagine doing anything else, like being a typical accountant, doing typical SMEs?
I mean, when I first started Lotus Accountants, I had some clients that were more typical smaller businesses. But when I do something, then to me, I have to be like an expert in it. So, I admire someone there's a guy that runs a business called the Cafe Bookkeeper. And so that to me is, again, niching and enables you to be the best in that field is how I feel
Yeah.
about niching. So if I'm doing something else, it's another business and I don't know it as well, I don't feel comfortable. Like I kind of feel like I could be missing out on some deductions or yeah. So I mean, I have got recruitment industry clients, for example, but that to me is, I feel
Yeah.
that's similar to how I run my own business.
Yeah. Professional
Yeah, but then I
services.
would,
Yeah.
a large part of it is then I still would want to know about the apps like Job Adder, and so I kind of, yeah, it's not just now knowing about the tax technical and how you're accounting. It's also then how can you make that as efficient as possible. A lot of things about
Yeah.
efficiencies for me as well.
You must go down a lot of rabbit
I
holes
do,
then when you're
I
doing.
do.
Yeah. Okay. I find I do the same because I have like this kind of hyper
Yeah,
curious, want to learn, want to grow kind of
yeah,
thing. But then it does affect like your efficiency
yeah.
as well at work. So how do you manage that?
I love Twitter.
Like staying
Have you got
focused
on
kind of
Twitter?
thing. Well, I saw your Twitter. I'm not on Twitter because I don't understand well, I look at it and it's kind of like I just see politicians and celebrities just shooting snipes at each
Okay.
other. So I never understood the need for it, but I know you're very active on it. You're the Twitter
I do
accountant.
like Twitter. So when I worked at Xero for a couple of years, and that was in between a business that I had a fallout and around a divorce, and I kind of was working out what did I want to be doing, and I loved Xero. I got involved with Xero probably 2010,
Yeah.
and for me it was just such an amazing opportunity to upskill, because quite often being a
Mm.
partner in a larger firm at the age I was at, you're off the tools. You haven't, I hadn't done accounts myself for 15 years probably. You're reviewing and it's a little bit different. So to be able to have that opportunity to look across a couple of hundred accounting firms, from large, I looked after Deloitte actually when I was at Xero, so from large big firms to smaller regional firms, and to see what people were doing, I really had a perfect opportunity to, one, help people. I really liked the idea of training, and had a different perspective from some of the other people that were account managers at Xero, because having run a
Hmm.
firm, different risk levels and what's important from a business perspective and as an owner, and just to see and meet a lot of different people. I kind of went in there wanting to learn about technology, and I came out just with amazing connections. And I've got some friends now that, one of them just turned 30, and just so it's not, you kind of have found all these people that are really interested in the same kind of rabbit hole that I'm in, and so now it's a bit of a joke that I'm the tester for a lot of people with sort of software programs. I break a lot of things. I don't know why. I've got apparently a high click rate. So
What made you decide to leave Xero? Like, because I think you were like one of the top salespeople there.
I loved it. It just was with the kids. The regional travel was quite hard, and then also the business
Yeah.
was getting
Okay.
to a point where Lara, my manager, was going on maternity leave. She was having her second child, and
Oh, yeah. So you had Lotus at the same time.
yeah. So I started Lotus,
Okay.
and that was because some of the clients came across when I left Logica, and sort of some of the film and TV audits. So I didn't want to lose that work.
And just to give a bit of context to everyone, it's like you've been a partner at Logica, and prior to that, like I think Broadway, for 10 plus years at that time, right?
So I started Broadway
You were
Accountants
co-founder.
after I had my first son. I left Deloitte, and so that was 2005, and then we merged in 2006, and I left in 2015.
Okay, so you started Broadway by yourself,
Yes,
or
yeah. So I started it though with the help of one of the ex-Deloitte partners, and they were actually in an offer share it at Broadway. So it was sort of a
Yep.
convenient name. We're in Broadway, and I wanted to do film and TV work.
Yep.
And so he gave me an office. So at that point in time, I got two job offers. One was for a smaller firm, and one was for a mid-tier firm.
Was that you coming back from mat leave
Yeah,
after Deloitte,
yeah.
or
I didn't want to.
okay.
Well, there were two of us that were directors. So I was on a partner development program. Then I went overseas.
Yep.
Then when I came back, one of the managers, who was just this beautiful woman, she was killed in a car accident before I went away. So some of my perspectives on life and work changed. And then also, unfortunately, when I was living in London, one of the housemates that I was living with, he was traveling through Spain with a friend, and the last carriage door wasn't locked, and so he fell out of the train. So both of them,
Really?
24,
Crazy.
yeah. And so for me, some of the values I would say that I felt were at Deloitte, it was all about what's my car and what school do my kids go to, and some of that status doesn't matter to me. It really is about friendships and traveling and experiences. And to me, it's like, when I go, what do I take with me? I take my memories. I don't take my stuff.
Yeah.
So the other opportunities, I was sort of wanting something that was probably not as when I was at Deloitte, I was working 6 days a week, quite long hours. There wasn't that time involved. And then I went and saw an entertainment industry lawyer who I really liked and used to work with, and he suggested still just going and speaking to John, who was the tax partner I worked at Deloitte, who'd gone out on his own when I'd gone overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, I remember I rocked up with my 9-month-old son, had a pram, and he said, I'll give you an office and a client, which was a good film industry client that we worked on together before, and see how you go. And then I'd also worked on an options trading job, and so I ended up working in there 2 days a week, that sort of first period. And they were really awesome too, actually. When I had my second son, they gave me sort of almost like maternity leave, even though I was sort of had my business in contracting. It's really good. And I still look after a few of the original senior traders from there that have all been doing different.
Well, what were you doing there? Were you helping them?
Yeah, they're management accounting.
Tax, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So like you didn't become an options trader just for the sake of it, just like to learn that.
You know what? If I had to go back, I don't know whether I would have been able to be an options trader, but I definitely at this point I was on my second marriage. But I given that ended in divorce, I might have rethought my options. I'm joking.
I like that. It's good.
But these guys have just done incredibly well. It's amazing what
I know. Yeah. I look at them as well. I was like, wow. Well, I mean, I have a few friends in that kind of arena as well. And it's phenomenal. But they're all really, really clever.
Yeah, and they're lovely.
Maths gurus.
Nice guys. Yeah.
What would you have done if you weren't an accountant, though?
I think I quite often talk about interior design. So my other passion is interior design, so being creative. So I had a home that I renovated in North Bondi, was in House and Garden magazine, and so that was a bit of a career achievement for me. So that's when we sort of had the first lockdown, my boardroom so we've got an office in St. Peter's, that it wasn't being used, and so I turned it into a shop. So it's called Lotus Home, and it has Asian antiques, homewares, giftwares, and Lotus treasures. So it's got a very automated accounting system. It's the most anal inventory system you'll ever see in a small business that size.
And you're actually there on the weekends, like
I was still working,
in your little storefront.
Yep. Yeah. So I was Friday and Saturday mornings, and then I did have. It is online, but I don't post anything because at the end of the day, Lotus Accountants is my primary business, and I'm quite mindful of I don't want to annoy my clients. But it's been nice. I'm kind of a little bit more part of the community with the shop. That I've got regulars, and one guy knocked on the door the other day actually, and his wife I've got these Frida Kahlo range of cushions and different things, and so she's got a lamp, a rug, ottoman, and then the other day came in. It's her birthday, and he's just so nice. She saw the fish in the window, so she really wants a fish. It's like a fish vase that's a retro. Where
do you get all your stuff from?
Well, a bit of a mix. I've tried Alibaba. There is an Indian importer in Marrickville, so I go to them. I went to a trade show actually at the start of this year, so a lot of candles. It's interesting learning what sells. So I think accountants are very good at sort of what's right and being technical, but the sort of the real, I think a large part of the personality types that's been missing out of accounting industry traditionally is that sales and the selling. And sometimes you might have got it, and they're the ones that have got everyone buying emu oil and ostriches back in the day. But I think for me, having the shop is just how important the marketing and sales. Like if that was to really go really well, I have to put a lot more effort into marketing. Like just having a really good back-end inventory system, it's not going to make my business successful. Having said that, if it did take off, you want to have a good inventory system. Otherwise, it would be like all those businesses at the moment that they sell you something and they say, "Oh no, sorry, it's a ship still offshore." You look at some of those businesses through COVID that just had no idea where their products were.
Yeah, crazy. Wow. Okay. So, well, by the way, what was the inspiration behind the name Lotus Accountants?
So it was very much, I was on holiday with my kids in Hawaii, and it was, I was getting home and I had to sell the house that I did have in House and Garden, and it was the idea of, I wanted a name that was kind of that, something bad happens, but then there's something good that comes out of it. Like that to me was my mindset to pursue the business fallout legally. I didn't get paid out. To pursue that would have taken up a lot of time and energy. I was going through a divorce. And so I had the idea of sort of like a butterfly, but I didn't really like the names there, Chrysalis or Pupa. Pupa's been done with the makeup. And so Lotus it had something that it was into yoga at the time. And so the whole idea is no mud, no lotus. So with, the lotus flower blooms from something murky and beautiful and into something beautiful. So that was the lotus theme, which now though moved it all away, but it's a very easy. I've just got lotus things everywhere.
Very cool.
And
it's kind of like a reflection of your life, like you've kind of gone through a whole bunch of challenges and have always come out on top.
Yeah. That's okay as a mindset. I had a friend one time say to me that it doesn't matter what happens, you always sort of you kind of make out like it's all fine. And at the time it was literally after the manager at Deloitte had died, and it was after her funeral. And I kind of, to me, it's like, well, what options do you take? Do you let something negative impact you and then you don't move forward? Do you wallow in self-pity, or do you just sort of say, okay, well, I've got an opportunity to learn from it. This has happened for a reason. What's, a bit of self-reflection as well. And then, I think the other thing I've actually got, which is no good for a podcast, but I wrote a book, Planning Plan B. And for me,
I was going to ask you about that later.
So for me, that was also, I did have sort of a lot of things happen that I wasn't expecting. They weren't part of my plan, and I got blindsided in both instances with the business and with my ex-husband. And so it was the whole concept of, how can I use my experiences to help somebody else so that if it did happen to them, they don't, have that same level of, stress. Yeah. So it was designed to sort of help with the legal and financial side of planning, so that if it did happen, you can focus on the emotional upheaval that you go through, because, trying to work out, what kind of lawyer. And I mean, at one stage I was on contact with the conveyancing lawyers, the business commercial lawyer, the divorce lawyer, and then obviously you're sort of looking at estate planning a little bit around that as well. So it was.
And I guess for context, I think for the listeners, you had a fallout with the partner, so you were basically asked to leave the partnership.
That's right. Yeah.
You were divorcing your husband.
Yes.
A few weeks later, and then selling your house as a result of that as well.
Yeah.
So there was a lot going on in a very short span of time.
Yeah.
So what's the essence of the book? Like what are the takeaways? Like if you had to summarize.
So it's how to plan for 10 of life's unexpected stressful events. So it is what you can put in place, and that can be an estate plan. So obviously it's, if you die, it's not stressful for you, but it's stressful for your family members. It's around dissolution of a business. So what can you put in place to protect dissolution of a business? We didn't have a signed unit holder agreement, so we had a trust structure, which then made it, you don't have any kind of legal fallback, which you hear it all the time. And we're a bit silly probably not having anything signed, but it's to pursue a trust structure fallout is very expensive legally. It's a little bit different than just a traditional company. It also has
So what would be an ideal structure for an accounting firm?
I don't think there's a one size fits all. I've certainly gone this time with just that stereotypical trading company owned by a family trust, and I did that because I still at some point, in having like an employee share plan, so you can't, things like that with a unit trust were a little bit trickier, and we had a discretionary income unit, so that was sort of if we'd got rid of that when we stopped having differential salaries amongst the four of us, then it would have been a different matter. But because we had that income discretionary unit, it meant that they could just divert the trust's income away from me without any kind of real repercussions. And so the capital units, it's arguable as to what value that might be. So they think they're $5-6 million firms, not worth anything. But so it has.
Okay. So estate planning,
it's
like
insurance. So what
dissolution
kind
stuff,
of insurance might you need? So divorce or a permanent separation, it does talk about, should you be getting a prenuptial agreement in place? And I've got also different experts in the field. So I do have insurance brokers, and also I didn't have an estate planning lawyer, but I do have divorce lawyers, and also, say, for example, disaster occurring while traveling. So, what kind of insurance might you have? And that was unfortunately my boss that used to work for me at Deloitte, or I used to work for at Deloitte. He now works with me in my business, and his daughter was killed again at age 24 on a moped in Thailand. They were turning into
dangerous.
their hotel, and someone hit the back of them. And so again, it was, it talks about the story that they've had, and then it's an insurance broker. What can you protect yourself for? Because, people these days that are relying on GoFundMe, something happens, and you have a look at sites like that for crowdfunding. It's a last resort, but that's not how you want to be coping with, getting bodies back to Australia, and it was pretty difficult.
I mean, most people will have travel insurance.
A lot of younger people don't.
Crazy. Yeah, no, I've always made sure I had it, either through a credit card or, purchased.
Yeah.
I think my dad is kind of like more risk averse. So I've kind of always, was trained to look at the fine print of things and the risk factors, and then how to mitigate them.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else? Any other takeaways?
It really, when I went to go, so I've self-published it, and when I went to have a publisher, their kind of view was that there's too many topics in the book. But the idea is that it's like pre-planning. So it's
the central topic. Yeah.
It's, if you literally had everything of this, you'd thought about it in the book and something happened, even with COVID, like literally any event that happened with COVID, loss of job, it's covered, loss of business, it's covered, travel plans cancelled, it's covered, people actually dying of COVID, wills, it's covered. So everything that's actually could potentially happen, and people don't like to plan, people don't like to think about it.
No, they don't. Like even prenups is always a very controversial topic for couples.
And so prenups actually, they're not, it's very hard to legally uphold a prenup, because by their very virtue is there's somebody that's at a disadvantage in the person that's normally signing. So so the law firm that talked in there, Melinda.
So what do you advise couples to do then?
People still think that it's going to protect them. But I think personally the idea of having those discussions that a prenup might do around what might happen if our relationship breaks down, what's involved. So some of the divorces I've seen with clients is where they've ended up really ugly and really nasty is there's a perception that there's more wealth than there is, and you must be hiding something. So I think having everything, be quite open and transparent going in can help if there is an exit on the way out. And
it's just no one wants to talk about it. That's the thing.
No one wants to talk about,
because everyone wants to think like they have the best relationship in the world.
So my big one there is actually just how important my career was in having the breakup. Like, the fact that I could still, losing a business and a divorce, like I got smashed, and it was my career and my networks and my contacts. And I literally, my second boss, Robert Rockland, I rang him after, because I knew he'd had a falling out with the business partners that Southerton split. And I rang him and he said, just come here. And I was in tears, and he said, you can have an office. So I was kind of got myself sorted, and he was amazing. And so it's just, and again, it's interesting actually. So he was my second boss, and now my third boss is, he was fantastic. And when he left Deloitte, he brought some clients that he had long-term relationships with. into Lotus Accountants. And so now, again, I think my biggest is don't burn your bridges. Those networks and connections that you make, you never know where.
How do you maintain them?
I just check in with people, lunches.
Do you have a spreadsheet and a system
No,
for
I
that
don't.
as well?
I don't. I did at one stage think about just making sure that you really contact people regularly, but I think because sometimes social media, some people slip through the cracks because they might not be on it. I've got a really good friend in the UK who she's not on Facebook, for example, but every now and then I'll send her a direct message.
Yeah. No, I've got more and more friends that are kind of like off Facebook and off social media.
Yeah.
As they get older, they're like, okay, I don't need to be on this.
Yeah.
I've got other things in my life going on.
And
like once they have families and stuff.
Well, it's tricky too, because what you sometimes put on Facebook might not necessarily be everything that's going on as well. So people presume that, okay, well, you must be okay, where there's sometimes, I've got friends that are ICU nurses down in Melbourne, for example, where she sort of, when we went into lockdown this time, she sort of rang me and said, oh, you're one of the few people to check in how we're going. And so it's just, my dad was very good at checking in on his family. He was the youngest of 7. And my dad died of cancer, actually, right when we started Logica. So I suppose another kind of perspective in the book of, he was 18 months. He was sort of diagnosed. He had 9 months to live, and then he lived for 18 months. So he was only 59. And so he, though, when he was alive, was just really, really good at keeping in touch with his family. So he'd moved to Sydney. All the rest of the family remained in Dubbo when he was younger. And and he just would check in. They'd do, back in the day, people would write their annual Christmas letters, post them out, which I think was
it's amazing. I think my grandfather was the same. Like, he had this little like black book of contacts, and he would like go through it and, make sure once in a while he would always contact everyone, call them, write a letter to them. And he had friends all over the world, like, because he just maintained contact. So whenever I traveled somewhere, he's like, oh, we've got family there. I'm like, what? We've got family there? Yeah, I've got this relative, I've got this friend. It's like, they'll look after you. And quite often when I like traveled to the US, for example, it didn't matter where I went, he had a friend or a relative somewhere that would take me in and pick me up from the airport. People that I've never even heard of in my life. They're like, oh yeah, we know your grandfather from, 50 years ago, something like that. And that's purely because he just maintained that contact. I was like, wow.
It is incredible.
And that was, old school, right? Like writing letters, whereas now we're so connected and we still struggle. Like I'm not good at it at all. I try, but struggle.
Well, what's interesting too, when I was younger and Dad would sort of say, especially like family in Dubbo, that I always felt awkward because I didn't know them. And then now you're older, you've got that experience, I suppose, that any of my friends' kids, if they ever come to me and said they wanted to come and stay, I'd always have them stay, because you have seen them grow up and you've got this vested interest in with their children. They don't care; they're just your mum and dad's old friend. It's very different.
100%.
But,
yeah. Okay. So what would you be doing if you weren't an accountant?
Interior designer.
Tomorrow, 100%.
Well, I'd like to be an interior designer where I didn't have clients. I just could do what I want. Is that a job? Can I do that?
It is once you're retired.
I think the concept of so I like buying things. We've recently just done up our backyard and we use recycled bricks. So trying to also create little things that are a little bit different and recycling. So I got this old door, for example, and recycled bricks and even the model.
Do you know what?
Sorry?
Do you know what I learned recently? Sorry to interrupt. I went to my parents' place ages ago, and then I remember I was talking to my dad about like carpets. We was looking at a house. It's like they have this beautiful carpet. And it's called a mohawk carpet, like a high pile one, but it's made out of recycled plastic bottles. I'm like, carpet can be made out of recycled plastic bottles. That's phenomenal.
It is good.
And it's a beautiful carpet. I love that carpet. Like I literally have slept on it.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's so comfy.
I saw one that was made out of fishing lines, like the old nets.
Okay.
But it wouldn't have been that comfortable. It was more for industrial office fit outs.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite clever. Yeah. I've got another idea recently, actually, which is called workhome.live. And I kind of...
Workhome.live, okay.
And
is it?
I want a startup app. All my friends have got these amazing startup technology apps. I want one. Don't know how I'm going to get one, but it's that's my latest idea. And what I really would like is, just when you go into your phone and you've got all the apps there, but you don't have that on the website. So you have, like, say, maybe Okta if you're in a bigger firm, and the apps are there. But and you might have, this is an organized thing. Oh my gosh, maybe I am a freak. Like on my Google, I've got all the folders and bookmarked and things. Lotus Accountants, Lotus Home. I'm looking at the top of them.
Yeah.
Clients, personal, etc. That it's more just like a website that you can go in, and then there's also some topics around each of them. So work at the moment, how can you ensure that your home office setup is appropriately set up, i.e., I don't think most employers wouldn't know whether they've got safe environments. And there was that workers' compensation case where a woman was murdered by her husband, and workers' comp ended up being paid out because they were saying it wasn't a safe environment. So I think there's some things there that, and live would be the travel and all the fun stuff. But I don't know. I don't know what I'd be if I wasn't an accountant. I wouldn't be a dancer anymore.
Have you got another book coming up? Or
I am writing another book with a friend, and it's called Co-Parenting with an Alien. And so that one is using some of the experiences that I probably have had with my now husband's partner, ex-wife rather, and then just the friend who's writing it, she's a child psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and I'm in a few Facebook groups, and I think, to lose a child and through way of an accident and the grief process is really hard. But to lose a child and that child is, there's no real valid reason why they don't love you, they don't see you. They've just been convinced that you're not a nice person, or however it works, by the other parent. So there's been studies where, even children of quite horrific upbringings, might have a parent that goes to jail, they will still love that parent. So the only times where there's really been a child won't love a parent is when the other parents manage to be able to alienate them. Yeah. And to me, it's kind of like a cult. The way that a person will do that, and quite often they've got their own personality disorders, narcissism being a large one. But
so this is your experience with your current husband's blended family?
So my stepdaughter. Yeah. Okay. And it's hard. It's hard on the kids. So he doesn't see his oldest daughter, but we see the younger one. And it's so now actually, which unfortunately, so Pauline Hanson, that's actually been one of the large drivers behind the changes in the family court. So parental rejection is now actually legally seen to be a level of emotional abuse. So in all the forms, if you want to report it, parental rejection does come up. So it's imagine you have your child, everything goes really well, and then your spouse.
No, I've heard about it. Yeah, like ugly divorces. People like
and they use the child as the weapon. They go, yep. And it's horrible.
Which is immature parenting and immature kind of selfish, I guess, tendencies of human nature. Yeah. Okay. So that's the next. When is that coming out?
Well, we're probably a third of the way through. So we're actually getting together this Friday to write a bit more. So we've got the structure and some of the topics, but we kind of wanted to make it so there's not really too much in Australia. There's some really good psychologists in the US in particular, and trying again to make it practical. So the whole idea with planning Plan B is it's practical. At the end of it, if you actually make the checklists and put it all together, you'd have a Plan B. And this would be, again, it's there are some good books out there. One's called Divorce Poison, and it's like, how do you cope? So some people, a large instance of particularly male suicide is because they don't see their children anymore, and it's again that rejection that you see. You've got a child, how can they not love you? And when you can't change that and you can't do that, so the idea would be, is there any way that you can change it? Is there any way that you can stop it? And unfortunately, it's really hard to change. And some people say
I can imagine.
A child's lifetime, but difficult.
Yeah, especially the court systems where everything takes so long to get through.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of theatrics, and it's very easy to basically put on a nice TV show and have a really good lawyer, etc.
I'm not a huge fan of either estate planning lawyers or divorce lawyers, to be honest.
But you recommend both of them in your book, though. You need them.
You need them. There are some that, again, the lawyer that's in the book for divorce, they don't do prenups. They're just like, well, you can't hold up in court, so we're not going to do it. We're not going to take our clients' money.
So what do you do then as a couple? Do you just have a conversation and document it between the two of you, or what's the best way to go about it? Because business partnerships are easy. Like you have a document, like a shareholders agreement, a partnership agreement, which you can talk about how dissolution will work out if there's a disagreement.
Yeah. In all, whether it be a business breakup, whether it be a personal relationship or an estate plan and you've got children fighting over it, it's always if there's money and then there's people involved. And I think the idea of, for a divorce, sitting down, it's a little bit tricky. So, you make a decision as a couple when you have kids. If you are financially able, as to one person might stop work to raise the children. And then that's all fine. But then if the relationship breaks up, that person that hasn't been working, they're in a situation, they're in a position of fear. They're like, well, I can't look after myself. You've now been able to get this money. So then you straight away start with an area of conflict. And one person will have more power in regards to the money situation, and one person will have more power in regards to the relationship with the child. And so as soon as you've got that disparity, you're going to have some sort of conflict, unless, we do talk about like collaborative law and how that will work. But, my personal view, I've been divorced twice, both times, taken into account. My dad did give me some money when he died. So I took that out, and then I did all our legal work ourselves. I actually lodged everything. And even though, I could have been really angry, he's still with his work colleague that he left before. They've just had a kid. I could have been really angry and bitter and revengeful, but who was that going to help? It wasn't going to help me move forward. It certainly wasn't going to help my two boys. And so to me, sometimes when you're really hurting, you just fake it till you make it anyway. So be polite.
Yeah, but that's an emotional thing. But
but that's just it. There isn't anything so if you can't have a prenup that goes legally, I would say.
And then emotions take over, etc. Like no matter what agreement you have, as you said, emotions take over in the end. And then
I think
if you don't have the maturity to see the big picture, then it all goes out the window.
Yeah. So I think being upfront and open about what financial assets you have, sitting down probably with an accountant rather than a lawyer and working out, okay, well, how would this work? What could we do? And the other bit would be, when you're fighting over the kids, again, it's a psychologist is more likely to be involved and benefit than, again, a lawyer. So to me, if you're fighting over kids and money, is a lawyer the best person to be helping you? I don't think so.
Probably not. Yeah. Okay.
And so if you actually changed it so I think technology is going to be a really good idea. So a large part of the book as well is there's an app that the government's starting to use. And so it is, you put all your assets in, it's, it's proven as to bank balances and it's set up, and then you go through and you sort of split it online. And then, when you get to a point where artificial intelligence, if it's only looking at case law, for example, and here it is, and go, well, if you go to court, you might lose, a couple $100,000 and you're going to end up with this amount, or you can do this now and this is what you get. Like, so the percentages, if you can have that technology where the AI is involved, and again, for estate planning as well, I think law is an area that has so much, is ripe for disruption.
Okay.
And
interesting.
Because it's case law it's all there. It's finding that information. So if the technology can pull that up based on similar sets of facts and finding relevant cases.
Okay, let's go back to accounting.
Okay.
So you worked in small, mid-tier, and big four firms. Like, what do you consider the major differences, and what would you advise sort of younger accountants to do or consider when they're making that decision?
I would really think about what it is they're wanting to do, what they're passionate about, and the interests that they have, and then actually pursue, who is an expert in that field that you want to be in, and try and get to work with them. Because, so many people, if you have, the number of staff I've had over the years, and if someone's passionate and wants to help and wants to learn, they're just a pleasure to work with, because they always go, a bit above and beyond. They're interested, and then that's how you learn as well. So for me, I deliberately worked with partners that had an entertainment industry bent, and when I went and worked with a tax partner, who was at Deloitte at the time, there were opportunities that came up that were really inconvenient sometimes, and I just did it anyway because that's what I wanted to do. So it's, again, if an opportunity comes up in an area that you want to be involved in, you make it work. And that for me is a massive part of why I think I've had the success I've had in my career, and the opportunities I've got is because I've made it clear I want to be, tax partner doesn't normally work with another group. So, I've spoken to him, said, I'm really interested in this. If you've got something I can do, happy to help. So they have it in their mind that, well, hang on, this has come up as an opportunity. So, if you're wanting to get into mergers and acquisitions, for example, but you haven't got in, first opportunity that you have, I would still just be, seeing who are the biggest operators in M&A, sending them, I'd send them a CV to the people that, you're wanting to work with, or because, to pick up any kind of specialisation or anything that you want to be doing, the best way to do it is to learn from someone that's already the expert.
I find most young accountants, they have no idea though. That's the issue. They're like, well, how am I meant to know what area of accounting, whether I should work in the mid-tier or big four, which one's better, which specialization I should choose. It's like they have no idea because I've never done it.
And it's hard. It's, who you work for just plays such an important part of your career. Everyone's worked for people that they don't like, and it's miserable.
Do you give different advice to females and males when it comes to the industry?
I haven't. And I mean, when I was working at Deloitte in particular, counselling out people was, a big part of the job that I had if they weren't working. And I look at where every single one of those people have ended up. They're doing way better than they would have done had they stayed in accounting. Like some of them are recruitment consultants. Some of them are lecturers in universities. And rightly or wrongly, an organisation's culture, for want of a better word, is still a way of conformity. It wants people to act in a certain manner, and that's because it produces it's less risky. Because if you know how people are going to behave, then you're not going to have to be troubleshooting different things. But that groupthink as well, I don't think is good for organisations. One of the organisations I really respect is Atlassian, and certainly from what I've seen is, they encourage diversity in thought, and how you do that in those big four firms, it doesn't happen. They want people to be like them.
Well, can I ask you, counseling out people out of Deloitte, what was the major reason that you found people didn't work out?
Performance. So in bigger firms, or all firms, you have a certain budget, and so if you have got people continually taking too long or making mistakes and having to fix things, it just...
Why are those people like that though? Why can't they just get it right?
Why?
Is it an aptitude thing, an attitude thing? Is it laziness thing? Like, what'd you find was the crux behind it?
It's funny because they're all smart people.
Yeah, because they got into Deloitte. Yeah. Like, there's a standard.
I wouldn't even say sometimes it was politics, because it sort of wasn't. It was, I don't know, it was just timing. Like, I mean, I look at sort of my older son, if I put him in there, he just takes his own time. Like, he just doesn't care. It would be, I'm trying to think of, you always have a few different people in mind. It always would come down to the quality of the work. Why couldn't they do it? I don't know. Maybe they weren't interested. Sometimes people don't get things. Like, I know, I've been in accounting for such a long period of time, but my manager, she just picks up things. Like, I'll be looking at something and she just thinks differently. So sometimes the accounting concepts and the level of information is different on a detail level. But having said that, on a higher, business end, like, that's why we work so well together, I will understand all that. So,
back to the whole passion thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Some people, don't have the passion for the industry, and that translates into the work. Yeah.
I mean, there was one person that I had to move on when we were in Logica, and he was falling asleep at his desk. I was like, what are you doing?
Well, I guess I want to ask you, from a female perspective, and you've kind of gone through where you were a director, how do you see like a female managing the whole mat leave thing, having children and being a partner at the same time, where there's obviously, client responsibilities and clients are attached to you as the partner? How do females manage that aspect of their careers? So
the first time I went on maternity leave and I was at Deloitte, and all my clients were handed over to a sort of my assistant manager at the time. And so, it's very hard in that instance because you are removed from everything, and then sometimes that's easy to be replaced. So that's quite a harder. If you step away fully and you're on maternity leave, then you open yourself up to be replaced because you have to be replaced because you're not there. And so that's whether that's right or wrong, that's the reality. Where if it's your own business, you never fully step away. So therefore, it's less likely to be that you are replaced because you're still there in some shape or manner. So when I had my second son, I was in the office with him. The first week we had sort of a meeting. We had one of the original other partners was creating problems, and then I just was in 1 day a week. So I still would, technologies obviously makes things easier, but
do you still get paid would your salary and distributions be prorated as well?
Do you know, we still,
as a partner,
when that partnership worked, it was really good. And so the guys, at that point in time, I think I reduced my salary. So we all took a salary at the time that was a little bit different. Initially at the start, we had 2 senior partners and myself and another guy who were on a lower salary. So I think that stopped, but then I still got profit distribution because largely the salaries kind of took up the bulk of the profit and then it was over.
Yeah.
And like I said, I actually had the company that the options trading company that I've been working at, they paid me like a maternity leave amount directly, which the guys didn't make me put into the partnership. I actually got that.
But do you see a female being able to step away completely? Like, like if you're an employee, say at a large corporation or even and you're just at a manager level, you can kind of step away for 12 months and not even think about your clients or anything. Could you do that as a partner?
No, I didn't. Even if, like, say, for example, when I stepped into Xero, so I still took, just under 2 years where I worked full-time at Xero, I would work, Lotus Accountants still would be in the evenings and Saturday. So I worked all day Saturdays.
Yeah, because that was like your side hustle, basically.
Yeah,
at the time.
well, it was...
While you grew your client base.
Yeah, it was while I grew the client base, how did I want it to operate? And then I also had Lara step back in. So my manager got caught up in the fallout of Logica. And so she was actually going on maternity leave 2 weeks after actually I left Logica. And so this was her second child. So she was able to take a full break, even in a smaller firm. But for me, I don't know. I just don't think you can personally. If it's your business, it's, if you want it to still be operating.
Because it is your business, even if you're a Deloitte, right, and you're a partner, it's still your business, really.
Yeah, well, I think as a partner, a little bit different because you can have, that's part of why you go into partnerships. So you go away and someone else can step in and look after your clients, or you had a bigger team to step in and look after while I was away.
But you still had some oversight and involvement, though.
I did, yeah.
I would imagine, yeah.
And look, I think from another, I was in partnership with 3 other males. Had I just stepped away and come back, I can't imagine they would have been overly keen with that. But having said that, I did have a fair break. But again, technology is such that you can be working odd out, different hours, and when the children, especially babies when they're young. I used to go in and he'd just be in a baby Bjorn. I just used to carry him around for a while, and then I end up. I think a lot of people too, if you make that decision to keep working, you end up, with a nanny or your childcare arrangements through that period are a little bit difficult. But having said that, through the split and the business split, I am so thankful I kept working through that. I really am. I am just having my career and my friends that were, for me professionally, it just was separate from everything else. That it just was enormously helpful.
Yeah, okay. If you had to look at it, what's the key to succeeding in this industry?
I do think it's changing. I think traditionally it was, I always go to mid-tier thinking and mid-tier firms. So being good at an area of expertise is definitely one area that's going to be enable you to do really well. I mean, I think of some of the tax lawyers that, I would still use and go to. It's because they're experts in an area of whether it be land tax or GST or so I do think at expertise level, technically, I think for me, I do think technology is enabling us to change the type of personality types that come through. So, I look at the group of people that I talk to on Twitter and social media and friends, and everybody is a lot more, gregarious. So that personality types, if you are they more introvert or extrovert? I think traditionally accountants are seen to be more introverted. I think an extrovert now, if you can explain the story of the numbers rather than just what the numbers mean, that really makes a big difference. So to be good technically, like I literally found yesterday a book that had, how to do a set of books to trial balance stage. And, so people sometimes, the technology, you lose the debit credit side of things, which I think is still really important, those foundations of accounting.
Yep.
And, Googling tax rather than going back to the legislation. So remembering sometimes that what we are doing is compliance. It is in their field, that it's legislation, making sure that you go back to basics of, reading the tax legislation, looking at accounting standards.
What was it like to go back on the tools after such a long time?
Scary.
Because when you started, like as you said before, you didn't have anyone, right? Like you were doing all the work by yourself. After doing your daytime work at Xero, you kind of came home and had to do all the compliance stuff.
Well, it's not. A large part of why I ended up working at Xero was because I couldn't work out in the reporting templates how they do the equity reporting, and it was just doing my head in because it wasn't logical. You sort of got to treat it as a non-current liability, and so some of the things that in the technology side of it are not your old style of doing things. So, for example, where a traditional accountant would do journal entries. And a bookkeeper, you see, like bookkeepers use accounting technology better than traditional accountants. It's
because they're doing it day in day out.
They're doing it day in day out, but they don't have that mindset that we traditionally had. Was if you want to change something, you do a journal entry. So if you want to piss off a bookkeeper in Xero, you muck around a journal entry and you don't fix up the GST, and then their GST wrecks out. And in accountants, most often, this is where Lara and I are always different. I can't get my head around the GST recs in Xero. It's really random, but they can check things and do things like a beautiful file, a Xero file that's been done by a good bookkeeper and a good accountant. You don't do manual journal entries. Like you don't need them. Very rare. And it'll be a source of truth. So they'll have every single invoice attached into your file. So whereas when I'd look at a file before, you'd have a big paper file and you'd go through everything and you'd cross-check. Yeah. Now I'm just in a Xero file. I can check, you know how to drill down, to get the information. Where when I was working in the shared office space, one of the partners there came in and he said, how do I get someone to invite me into a file? I said, well, they just go into this section, add you in. And next minute he came in and he said, they've sent me their email and their password. And it's just, to think of, if a partner, this is my view now, if a partner of any accounting firm doesn't know how to find their way around a Xero file or a Maya file or any online accounting software file, then they can't be sure that things are right, because it's inefficient. It's inefficient to be looking at someone else's, printed work paper. If you can't check the assurance dashboard in a Xero file or just see that things have changed, bank recs, things that have been added, it's just not an efficient process. So,
was it hard to transition, like to being on the tools again?
Yeah, it was. A lot of my friends said, "Can't you just watch some videos? Why do you have to go and work there?" but for me, it was it's just a different mindset of how we were used to doing accounting. So,
well, what's your tech stack now in your? Because I mean, your business now, like for context, is kind of more of a lifestyle business where you don't have like crazy ambitions to grow it. You've got a couple of people, that from your network that work for you and help you out. You've got 4 or 5 staff, I think.
I've got so someone who does
or contractors,
a couple of contractors and 2 employees.
Yeah,
and then so at the moment, I suppose to me the term lifestyle has sort of sometimes a negative connotation. Like, is it like a female version of, she's doing that like it's a hobby. It's like, you've got a rich husband and you can go and open a shop. So I'd probably describe it more as it's a business by design. It's how I want my business to be at the moment. Because
you don't advertise or like you've never really done much marketing.
No, I've actually never done any marketing since we've opened up.
It's always just been referrals. Yeah.
And every now and then I go and do I'm not taking on any more clients. I would take on Hugh Jackman. I say that all the time. Yeah. I will take on Hugh Jackman. Putting that out there.
Hugh, are you listening?
Yeah.
Who does his accounting
I
now?
don't know. No one's owned up. I have sort of inquired, but yeah, I'm still working on that one. So that
Yeah, and it's still growing. Like I know you've told me your numbers. I'm like, it's still increased dramatically over the years just through referrals.
well, so of everyone that I've ever met, Brett Kelly is one person that I think has done an incredible job at building a very successful accounting practice, and obviously even enlisting it. And so every now and then there's that competitive part of me that goes, yeah, I want to build a business like that. And then I get like sidetracked by another idea, and I don't know. It's, you know, that's a full commitment, isn't it? It's 100%. This is what you're doing. Where I can be a little bit scattered in my interests. There's a really good book that one of my friends gave me. It's called Essentialism. I forget.
Yeah, so I heard you
Yeah,
recommend that.
it was really good. And Key Person of Influence.
Yep,
So those two books are
the
good to
dent
read together.
guys. So what's your tech stack?
Okay, so I believe, you know, how big's your tech stack is a bit like, look at my flashy car. So it's making the most out of software that most people have. So it's Office 365. In Office 365, I use Teams. I use there's a workflow section that we've created, and I've been to a few of the Microsoft Ignite conferences when they were running, and just really tried to make sure that the software that I've got in there, like say bookings, for example, rather than Calendly. So just tried to use as much as I've got in there. And it's really good for security and things like that as well. Xero, clearly. So Xero, I use Xero Work Papers, Xero Practice Manager. And then,
So XPM.
yeah. And then I've got, if I click up here, I've got Join, Join. I use that for one of my larger clients, and that's more just a consolidation tool. I use Now Infinity. I use Class.
Do you use like Carbon or Practice Ignition or anything?
No, I don't. A little bit of that is because I've got a lot of clients that if any of my information did get out, they are people that are well known in Australia. So I'm a little bit sensitive around my data. Yep. So I try and keep it within large listed companies. And that's largely because, I mean, I know, so when I worked at Xero, you don't see files, but you would see a practice and you'd see the names. And so for me and the type of clients, and because, you know, you've been around an industry a while and you see like trusts or companies, you can kind of get a bit of a feel for what businesses do. And so for me, even just some of them, say, for example, Practice Ignition, well, I know the people that operate it and they're all really great, but it's still a privately owned business. And I don't know whether do they see, you know, because that's your engagement letters, right? That's all your client information going out. It's your fees, who that level of detail is.
So do you do it manually then right now?
I use it XPM. So in Practice Manager,
XPM, okay.
You can set up quotes which you quotes your engagement letters. So I've, again, that whole automation there. I use Go Cardless, B2B Pay. B2B Pay is actually where my husband works. So just giving that a plug. And so it's, again, just a payment services company.
What's your end goal or ambition? Like what else is on your bucket list or must achieve?
Do you know, I used to want to be treasurer of Australia. And the biggest problem I've had there is I've never really liked either political party. I've jumped around a bit. I think I would like the idea of...
Is that because you wanted to change the tax system?
I do actually. Oh my gosh. The OECD are sort of bringing out lots of different changes, and some of, you know, the people that I really admire, like Graham Cooper, or there's like people that have been just incredible tax minds. Like I was really lucky when I worked at Deloitte, and you get to work with people that are really good at what you do. So I love being around people that are experts in their field. And I'm really lucky, I think, working at Xero, I got to meet a lot of people that were either within Xero themselves. Like I think as an organisation, it's, you know, particularly when I was there, some really amazing people that are very passionate about improving the accounting industry and small business. And with the OECD and changes to tax law, I just think we're living in a period where, with global taxes the way that they are, and the changing in developing countries, you know, we've got climate change, you know, how do you address all that? Is it through its taxation? You've got, you know, movement of people, you know, obviously COVID borders withstanding, that how do you tax companies like Google or Facebook and, make it a more an equalization across, the end users.
Yep.
I just think there's so much there that could change and be improved. And we just sort of, I think, you look at some of the traditional monarchies, and when they get overthrown, that if capitalism keeps going the way it is, and you get so many people that are so wealthy and people that are not, then you're going to have that same sort of problem, I think.
The revolution thing. Yeah.
And you look at.
Well, I never understood in Australia why we don't have inheritance taxes. I think that irks me the most.
I do think that's something that it's got to be on the table.
Like, really irks me. I don't understand why.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about a couple of $1 trillion in wealth transfer over the next.
Well,
couple
especially
of decades,
just like correct, especially now with just crazy property prices, etc.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me at all. But I'm very big on a meritocracy. Like, I'm huge. I think every single person should start on a level playing field, not like you get old money and then you get different opportunities, but that's just personal belief system. Like, I would not, I don't intend to, like, for example, give anything to my children. You know? It just doesn't make sense to me. But I come from a migrant mentality, so.
There's a really good, it's like a clip where they talk about, there's like a starting line and they have all these kids at the start, and then they say, like, if you're born into, a white family, move forward 5, and, it goes through, and then it's like, if your parents are still together, and so then it's sort of, okay, now start the race. And it's just this really good, you don't sometimes appreciate that, you have a particular bring up.
What's it called?
I've forgotten the name. I'll find it for you. But
cool.
Then there's another one about equality and equity too, where it's 2 people standing up on some bricks as to whether they can see across. So, if you gave them the equal size bricks, one still might not be able to see over a fence, where if you give one a bigger brick, then you can all see. There's so sometimes views like that, I think, are going to become.
Yeah, it's a topic for another day.
It is.
Look, I know we're wrapping up, a bit conscious of time, so I'll ask you some quick fire questions. What's your favorite quote?
Just do it. Nike stole it.
Nike stole it. What's had the biggest impact on you? Like, either personal, book, mentor? What have you learned recently has had the most impact on you?
The most impact would probably be, I think, traveling. So it's just seeing different cultures and different ways of living, and traveling through countries, sort of like India, Pakistan, so through South America, and just so having an appreciation for what we have here every day, having clean running water, that's amazing. And we take it for granted.
Pretty special. Yep. Electricity is incredible. Yep. Well, speaking of travel, then, what's your must-visit country?
Spain, I suppose, what came to mind. I love Spain.
That's your favorite?
Yeah. I mean, I've got lots of favourites, but it's just, this is so different, and the people are so friendly, and the food's beautiful, wine's good. I do like Spain.
So if you could only go back to one country, that would be it?
Yes. Yeah, probably would be.
Yeah, okay.
Having said that, I'm planning on Italy next year, so Italy's probably number 2.
Okay. Is there a country that you haven't been to but like really, really want to go to?
Egypt and Iceland. Yeah.
Yeah, Iceland's amazing. Highly recommended. What's something most people don't know about you?
Well, everyone knows that I've got OCD with glasses now. That was a secret. What else? I don't know, actually. I think people think I'm probably more organised than I am, and more set in my ways, where I'm quite open to, if someone else comes along and wants to plan something, and I think that's a good idea, I'd like to, that's awesome. Where I'm not adverse to not being in control. I think people think I want to be in control. If someone's got better ideas, I'll jump on board.
Yeah, it sounds like me, basically. People think I'm the same, but I was like, no. If you come to me, tell me you've got a thought out plan and it makes sense, I'm like, go for it, do it. But I just need to have trust that you know what you're doing. Yeah, I'm trying to teach my older son to drive. That's how that feels. If I knew he could drive, I'd be okay. Who would you want to have a drink with the most in the world, past or present? Hugh Jackman. Yeah, I thought so. What would you ask him? Do you want to be a client? What if he says no? Oh, at least I asked. That's the end of the conversation. You're getting up and then going? No. I'd probably want to find out, who's, what kind of, you go to those sales tactics, don't you? So trying to find pain points and what can we improve.
that would be interesting.
Okay. How do you find time to put up stuff on Twitter and all of that? Like, how do you even think of stuff?
I think for me, social media has to be something that you enjoy doing, and if you have to think too hard about it and you're putting it up, it's not fun and it becomes a chore and it looks forced. Where I've just now got to a point where there's, like, say for example, okay, here's topical, Christian Porter. With that blind trust, my first thought was still, well, how's that going to be taxed? Like, what's actually the implications? Because the legal fees are non-deductible. But if he's getting an income that he's declaring as a personal income level that has gone to pay his legal fees, like, that's, to me, is it the trust distribution? Is it in respect of his employment? Was there, that's just where my head goes.
Naturally,
and through Twitter,
you want to have a dialogue.
Yeah, I can contact a journalist, and next minute there's an article that's, what about tax consequences?
Interesting. Okay.
So you have direct access to really amazing people.
Fair enough. Makes sense. Kylie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
It's been a
Michael.
pleasure.